Well, hello everybody, from wherever you're dialing in from today, or if you're listening to us on your favorite streaming services. Welcome to our Friday Coaching Cafe. Today's session, we're looking at the topic is you can't coach everyone, or can you? And I am joined by the very lovely Bridget Calvert. Bridget, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Paula, for having me. It's a pleasure.
We've done our around the grounds to see where everybody's dialing in for. We've just had Naples in Florida come in. We've got Tokyo all around Australia. So welcome to everybody. We love having you join us at the Coaching Cafe. As we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians and the traditional owners of the lands upon which we meet today and their continuing connection to the land, waters, and communities of Australia and the lands from all around the world upon which you might be joining us. We pay our respects to them and their elders, past, present, and emerging, and elders from Indigenous communities around the world. So, thank you all for joining us today. So, what's on our agenda today? Well, the next few weeks, we're going to be diving into core competencies, so the ICF core competencies, which is particularly why I've got Bridget, because Bridget has a lot of experience and knowledge in this space. So, today we're going to look at the ICF core competency demonstrates ethical practice. And we're specifically going to be looking at when to coach and when to refer to other services. So, as always, the Coaching Cafe is all about creating shared learning experience, having thought-provoking conversations. And for those of you who are looking out for your ICF CCEs, they will be available at the end of the session. As we go along, if you have questions or comments or thoughts, please pop them into the chat box and we'll have a look at them. And incorporate them, because it is about creating that shared learning experience. So it's an interesting when I look at the topic of you can't coach everyone or can you, one of the stories that really pops into my mind, Bridget, was when I first started coaching. I came and I did my Cert 4 and I was super excited, and I was let's call it gung-ho, was, I'll just coach everybody all of the time. And when I see this topic come up, it always reminds me that sometimes you have to think about, is this the right time to coach, and seeking that permission to coach, because otherwise you're just coaching at people as opposed to coaching them. And there was a couple of times where I just didn't seek that permission to get started, and that this topic always reminds me of that.
Absolutely.
So we're going to dive in and look at, in the core competencies, we're looking at maintains the distinctions between coaching, consulting, psychotherapy, and other support professions, and refers clients to other support professionals as appropriate, which sits under demonstrates ethical practice. So that's what we're specifically looking at today. But I guess the question, my initial question, Bridget, is can everyone be coached?
Well, it's a very interesting question, and the answer is yes and no to a certain degree. It depends on which lens you're looking through. So, I believe that everyone can be coached in certain situations, and then others not necessarily. So, let's say, for example, we are looking at those formal coaching coaching sessions. You're communicating with someone in a formal way and taking a coaching approach to that conversation. You need permission to be able to do that. So, if you have permission to coach, it's really important not only to bring yourself to the table 100%, but that person that you're coaching also needs to come to the table and be 100% there and focused on that conversation. So, I think as long as you have permission in that space, then you can coach. Of course, you can lead a horse to water, and there might be times where, on the odd time, where someone's not really in that headspace where they want to be coached, and they might be resistant to coaching, and so therefore, in those particular circumstances, that person may not be in a position to, I guess, embrace the coaching experience, because their mindset is not ready. They're not in that headspace to want to give themselves 100% to the process. And you really need to, be there 100% to get the most out of the process. Having said that, I have been in situations before where people may have been resistant to coaching, but yet when they learn actually what coaching is, that it's a confidential conversation and it is all about them, you see the barriers tend to shift and the obstacles tend to fall away a little bit. That resistance softens because people start to believe, oh, actually, this is about me, and oh, actually, there is somebody that's going to listen to what I have to say. And it's a really glorious experience for those that haven't been involved in that before. So that's another way of being able to coach someone who perhaps you may not have been able to start with, because that piece around education, around what coaching is and what it's not. And then, of course, you have your everyday coaching conversations where you're not necessarily stopping to say, can I coach you on that, or can I have permission to coach? But you're taking a coaching approach to your conversations. And in the workplace, it might be that you're asking open and curious questions, that is taking a coaching approach to your conversations, which supports people. Let's say, for example, if they're feeling a bit below the line, or they're feeling a bit frustrated about something, or they're closed off, or they have resistance around them, but you happen to ask them a really good coaching question that might lift or change their thinking, or raise them sort of from below the line to above the line. And all of a sudden it opens up their world or opens up different perspectives. So in that example, you can coach someone who potentially might have been closed off to it because they were resistant or below the line or feeling frustrated.
Yeah, and I love that distinction between where it's a predetermined coaching conversation to it's an all day, everyday opportunity to utilize your coaching in your leadership roles and the workplace in general, and really just opening that, asking that great big open question that shifts how a conversation might be going.
Absolutely, exactly right. So you'd really open to supporting that person to explore and look at options, and find the opportunity in something rather than perhaps feeling frustrated or stuck, as an example. And Mary's got a question there. When you take a coaching approach, as just described, you are not asking permission, right? And Mary, there are different ways of asking permission too. It might be, can I ask you some questions about that? Would you like to talk about that further? So it's not literally saying, can I have permission to coach you? But in those everyday coaching conversations, you're inviting someone to have a conversation with you. If it's a one-off question that you're asking, you don't have to stop and ask permission for it. You're just approaching that conversation in an open and curious way. So it's taking that coaching approach rather than that dedicated formal coaching approach.
Yeah, and one of the things I've always loved about coaching is that I actually think you can coach anybody in the right circumstances. And so you can coach across generations. You can coach sideways, upways, downways. You can coach across different cultures. Because it really links into it's about that person. So the coaching approach, the coaching process works for everybody because it's about them and not about you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's have a look at when we're in the workplace, what some of those other approaches might look like, and this is all about that distinguishing between coaching, consulting, psychotherapy, other support professions. But it's also about thinking about in the workplace, what are the other roles or the different modalities that we can use, and deciding which is the right approach to use. So there's lots of different modes. So we start with one that comes up a lot, which is the directing and telling. So where we're providing answers, we've got direction, we're giving direction, we're providing clarity. It might be urgent or a compliance matter, and we're just going to be directing and telling that person what they need to do. And there's lots of times when, as a leader, Sometimes you have to actually direct someone to do something. The how they go about doing it might be an opportunity that you're coaching, but we do need to let them know. So and that may be best when there's urgency or risk, or there's clearly a right answer or a non negotiable path forward, is when we would look at that directing and telling. And then we've got advising or mentoring. So where we share experience and perspectives to guide thinking and decision making. And we might use this when experience or perspective would add value and support around that better decision making. So sometimes letting people know how what challenges they came up when they tried different things. There's lots of times when that advice or mentoring can really add value to the story that's being told, or the experience that someone has had. And the key about this, though, is being really mindful about which mode am I in and knowing what that mode is. Um, so then we've also got training, which is absolutely something that we need to do. So building knowledge and skill through instruction, demonstration, and practice. So best when the person lacks the knowledge or skills to do it themselves. So when someone doesn't know how to do it, they don't know where to start, they've never been shown something, then training is exactly what we need for that person at that point. And then as a leader, we'll have counselling. So supporting people emotionally and processing well-being when personal issues are central. And sometimes people do just need to talk about something. They don't need to solve a problem, but they just need to have a chat about what's going on in their world. And yeah, so it's not about how do we solve the problem. It's just a beautiful, safe space for someone to talk through what they need. And I'm separating this from counseling as a profession, because there's differences in that as well. But in the workplace, we are a sounding board for people sometimes. We are someone they can come and talk to. There's also the do it all yourself, which I have been very good at doing, particularly previous in my before I found coaching, which is taking on the role and fixing the problem for the person. Very good fixer. Just ask me, I can fix anything. And I put in there, that's my bit of tongue in cheek, that says it's best when rarely we shouldn't be
Yeah.
doing this, because it makes it all about us and not about the person, the person doing it for themselves. And it may be faster, but it definitely reduces learning, ownership, and growth. It also means that you are taking on a lot for yourself, and it's probably better that the other, you don't need to be taking that on. And then we've got the coaching. So using questions and listening to unlock thinking, awareness, ownership, and accountability. And best when the person has the capability and the situation calls for exploration and growth. So there's a range of modes that we use. I often talk about it being the hats that I'm wearing. So which hat am I wearing in the conversation that I'm going into? Um, yeah. So Bridget, anything you'd add into any of those different modes?
Yeah, look, I agree with you about which hat are you wearing? And I think asking yourself, how do I serve this person best that's standing in front of me? So how will I know? I've got a great toolkit that I can call upon, and what is going to serve this person. I often think that I'll always go with coaching first and be open and curious. But the others are all valid and important. Places to be as well. And as you say, with number one, that directing or telling, when there is urgency or risk, that's appropriate for that moment. You can't ask someone an open and curious question and send them off on their way if there's risk involved. Obviously, and advising and mentoring, most certainly, people's experience is valuable, and it can be shared to support others in guidance. And with the counselling, yes, to be able to reflect on something, a challenge or a barrier or an obstacle or something that's happened for someone, that counselling space offers more time to reflect and think about that than the coaching will, because the coaching it's future focused, and it will call upon the past or things, challenges and barriers in as much as it's supposed to help you to move forward. Like, what can you learn and what can you take from that to move forward, is how we might use the past when we're coaching or something that's happened or a challenge. Whereas with the counselling, of course, it affords more time to actually reflect and focus on that challenge. And the doing it yourself, absolutely. It's not valuable for the person in the environment where, if we're going with that growth mindset, it completely strips that away if we're doing everything for everybody, and therefore it doesn't support that confidence that the people want when you trust that they have the answers within them.
Yeah, and with the counselling too, I was just thinking around the last couple of sessions we had around that mental health space.
Mm,
And it's knowing where does my expertise finish and where might we need additional expertise. So in from that counselling perspective, if someone is has a mental health concern, it's where's the next step for that person because it's now outside of the skill set that I have. And how do we help them connect in with where they need to? So, whether it be counselling, whether it be a mental health professional, whether it be a psychologist or a support group or their GP, it's knowing where that boundary is, which is critical in that coaching space, is knowing where that boundary is and then helping move to that next space.
mm.
So we like to use this. This is one of my little favorite tools, is around knowing when to coach and when another modality might be needed. So Bridget, do you want to take us through this one?
Sure. So this is what I'm talking about when we talk about having our own toolkit and noticing who is standing in front of me and what do they need, what's most appropriate, and how to communicate with them. So, for example, if a person's skill or knowledge is low to begin with, or they're experiencing something new in the environment and they're not familiar with it, we might do a mix of some training for that person to upskill them. We will do some mentoring and guide them and perhaps share our own expertise in that area, maybe a bit of directing and telling, and a little bit of coaching as well, because we're going to be open and curious and ask them questions too. So we're building on that person's skill and knowledge through using all of those modalities to support them until they start to increase and develop their skill and knowledge. And as they do, then we would be using more coaching because their performance is increasing and they're becoming more high performing in their environment. So coaching would be appropriate there rather than the training or the telling, directing. And of course, when the situation or the context changes, like extreme or once-off type of situations or contexts like an emergency or something at risk or what have you, then yes, we would certainly be shifting into that mentoring, directing, or telling, even if the person's skill or knowledge is quite high. There are moments and times, of course, where we can't send someone off to do their own research or find their own answers when there's a risk involved. And so, therefore, there's value in the mentoring, the directing, and telling at times, as we spoke about earlier, depending on the situation.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about this is that coaching could be an option in all of them. It does come down to it does come down to it depends. But for me, I also think one of the benefits of coaching is that it could be used after as
Mm,
well. So even if it was an extreme once off and you needed to do that directing or telling in the moment, there's still that really great opportunity afterwards to have a coaching session around the what did happen and how might that if we think about the reflection on that. So what did you notice? And based on that, how might you approach this next time so that you're still building that skill and development in the person?
absolutely. I mean, you've got the red dot and the yellow dot in opposite positions there, when skill and knowledge is low versus when skill and knowledge is high. So there is an opportunity, of course, when skill and knowledge is high to start off with those, even in those extreme or once-off situations where you might still take a coaching approach to start with and back it up with perhaps some mentoring, directing, or telling. Whereas when the skill and knowledge is low, you'd start off with that mentoring, directing, telling as an example.
Yes, I often think about it from medical shows that I've watched. So I've watched a lot of, the Grey's Anatomy, the Resident, those sorts of ER as well. And I really connected with them from that coaching perspective because even in an emergency where it's life or death, in those teaching hospitals, they actually use coaching. And they're asking them, so what approach are you going to take, and how would you do that, and where would you do, what are you, whatever you're going to do, and what are you looking out for? So even when it is an emergency situation, they're taking a coaching approach to help that person really think about what it's meaning for them at that particular time.
Absolutely.
So even when it is that extreme once off, I always think back to that says, we will never put someone in a dangerous position, and we don't want anybody to go and do that. But even that thinking about your coaching approach to when you are in that, there's still opportunity to use our curious questions as we're going along.
Yes.
Yeah. So can we coach everybody? I think we're suggesting that there is opportunity to do that.
I think so. I think, I always take a coaching approach first, always. It's just, I guess it just becomes part of how you operate after a certain period of time that you go in with that, open and curious position. And knowing the benefits of it and how people feel when they're asked a question rather than when they're told what to do or, guided in some way or someone's given advice or what have you. We all know what that feels like. So I always think that asking a question's the best way to start, at least, and taking a coaching approach and understanding that, you've got other tools in your toolkit that you can use if need be.
Yeah, and thinking about that ICF ethical practice is it's about knowing when it stops being a coaching when it stops being coaching, and knowing and
Mm.
letting that person know that it has stopped being coaching, I think is that key as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Which brings us back to how do I serve this person in the best possible way? And coaching at times won't be the best way. And there will be other things that will support that person better for that particular situation.
Yes, and interestingly, I've added in here, when is coaching the right approach? And particularly from a leadership perspective, um, leaders have to use all approaches. If it's a one-on-one specific setup coaching session, it is a little bit easier because it's very clear that we are here for coaching. Whereas in a all day, everyday space, it is about how the leader chooses the mode that they're going to use at that particular point in time. Mary's also said, what do you say when they are looking for mentoring in the moment? And it's a great question, Mary. It comes up all the time.
It does. And I think, Mary, if you are in a formal or dedicated coaching conversation, I would park that mentoring, in that conversation. I think it can be easy for a person being coached to say, well, what's your opinion? What do you think I should do? It's an easier approach, and then perhaps for the coach to give an answer. I think in the formal settings, I would leave that and I would throw it back to the coachee. What do you think? Who else could, if I wasn't here, who else could you refer to? And stretch their thinking further. Now, in the workplace, of course, when you are wearing different hats, there might be moments where you're having conversations in the same conversation where mentoring might be appropriate. I think it's one of those things again. What's going to serve that person in the best way? Are they just looking for an answer because it's nice to get one from you, or could you stretch them further, or is it genuinely this person's skill or knowledge potentially, might be limited, and therefore you're going to offer something? But certainly in the dedicated coaching conversations, those formal, I would leave the mentoring out.
Yes, I've also asked the question around, so if it wasn't me, but it was another HR expert, what do you think they would suggest at this
Mm.
point to, particularly in a dedicated HR, in a dedicated coaching session? if it wasn't me, but it was any other HR person, and you went to them, what advice do you think they would give you, or what suggestions do you think they would make? Because they've probably got an idea of
Mm,
what I would say anyway. And so, but it means that they've thought about it rather than me saying it specifically.
yeah.
And if I am the HR subject matter expert, oftentimes when there may be some right or wrong, because it's compliance based or it's legal and from that perspective. And so sometimes I might provide some advice around that. But my next question is, so thinking about that, what approach would you like to take, or how would you like to do this? Because it then comes back to them being the person who is taking the ownership and the responsibility for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the little framework that we've put together here, so we want to use coaching when the person has enough knowledge to contribute. So if they do have knowledge and skill in this space, we want to use coaching. When there's more than one possible approach, because as we know, there's lots of different ways to do different things, and people will go along and do them differently. So if it's not a really black and white, you have to do this, then if there's more than one approach, we want to use coaching.
Mm,
When ownership or confidence matters, when development is part of the outcome, or when a thoughtful conversation will lead to better solutions and that stronger commitment. So if it's a dedicated coaching session, then it's a dedicated coaching session. And I guess this is around in the workplace and the leadership role when coaching would be the right approach. And so I've popped in there a little simple decision check, which is what question can I ask to understand more? And often when someone in the workplace comes to us, they provide a context and we jump into the problem solving when there's really is an opportunity to ask a question and understand more before we move into that space. And then thinking about what knowledge, experience, or options do they already have? And again, it goes back to I think what Bridget was saying about what will serve this person best. Thinking about this person, what experience and knowledge do they have that we can tap into from this perspective?
mm.
And how could a coaching conversation help them think more clearly and take ownership, which is really about giving that back to them and growing and developing that person.
Yes.
And as Bridget said, she starts with the coaching approach first. And I love that. So it's that think coaching first to understand and then decide if you need another approach. And maybe you do. But if we start with that coaching approach and we think coaching first, we will coach more often. And sometimes it's not our natural preference. Our natural preference might be something else. But if we think coaching first, and we seek to understand before we move into something else.
Absolutely.
Well, if you can believe it, Bridget, we have come to the end. 30 minutes just
It
flies by.
does fly by.
Um, and I really love having your experience on these coaching cafes and digging really deep into those core competencies. So thank you so very much for joining me today.
A pleasure, an absolute pleasure. Thanks, Paula.
So as always, we've got our certificate for in workplace and business coaching, the diploma in leadership coaching. We do executive and senior leader coaching. So please reach out to us if there's anything that you need. And we will look forward to seeing you next Friday as we continue on our deep dive into our core competencies. And have a really lovely Friday, everybody.
Bye for now.